Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to Rugby Nation. What a very, very special Rugby Nation we've got for you today. We've had some luminaries on Rugby Nation this year. Wallabies, Wallaroos, Australian Sevens players. But we've never had Jimmy Tucker. Jimmy joins me today, the great career male, rugby rider, golf rider, extraordinaire, tour leader at this World Cup as well. Jimmy, you've just come off a 12-day tour and you're back on the Journo tools. How are you feeling?
Mate, it's very hard to come down from the traditional Japanese attire that I had on a few nights ago. Sleeping on a futon on the floor, but I've managed to do it quite well. So back in the full go of Rugby World Cup with everything on the line, basically.
Yep. Here we are in Oita, which is the southernmost venue in the World Cup. It's very hot and humid. It's not right now. It's actually quite pleasant, Jimmy, but during the day it's very hot, very humid. We've seen in the All Blacks Canada game earlier in the week there was a lot of drop ball. It's going to be very hot and very humid for Australia Uruguay tomorrow, isn't it, Jimmy? What are they going to do? Are they going to wear some gloves, or have they been training with soapy balls? Or
well, I think they'll just go with regular Australian policy. There's not going to be any Stirling Mortlock style gloves being handed out just before the game. This is just sort of your standard February, March game in Australia.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I really want to see, like, someone has to say the Wallabies have had perfect conditions to win football games at this World Cup. So if someone said, give me a perfect field in Sapporo under a dome, give me a perfect field in Tokyo afternoon game, we just win those two games.
Yeah.
And no one's called that out and said, you've got the dream run, and now they're under another dome. So the Wallabies should be going, rolled out for us, we win these games, but that hasn't happened.
100%. And as you can see behind us, it is under another dome, so the rain won't be a part if it comes. It does get a bit muggy in there, so you can expect a little bit of drop ball, but Uruguay up and then Georgia. Look, there's a lot of focus on the rise of the Tier 2 nations. Uruguay beat Fiji off a 4-day turnaround, but the Wallabies should be getting this job done tomorrow, shouldn't they, Jim?
They should be, but I want to see a smart Australian team. Everyone talks about from within that we're a smart team. Now, against Uruguay, they got big guys, very physical, kicking halves. So let's take them on in the forwards to start with and just earn that right. It's a really standard line, but earn that right to do something fun and attacking. Like, we constantly have this idea that we start a game throwing the ball around as much as we can in the first 3 minutes. This slow start thing, people have narrowed it down to 2 games at the World Cup, but I can tell you I've seen a lot of slow starts over the last couple of years.
That's a good point.
And a bit more circumspect to start with, maybe get into the flow of the game and then have a real crack.
Yeah, and I think we heard that Nick White, we threw those questions, we've been throwing those questions at people all week. Nick White said, yep, look, maybe we do have to be more patient, show more restraint, and that makes a lot of sense because that forward-based, tighter game has worked in the second half. You'd like to see them tomorrow, as you say, meeting sort of Uruguay's strength, which is up front, and dominating early through that zone, right?
Yeah, well, that also gives them a better preparation going into bigger games as well. Like, that's how you play a regular game of footy.
Jimmy, Jordan Petaia is making his debut. Now, I can't stress how much Jimmy Tucker is the king of Brisbane rugby riding. He knows the Queensland rugby riding. You've probably heard about this kid from a few years back when he was starting to dominate schoolboy footy and then all of a sudden was in the red system, right, when he was about 17. He's finally managing to get his test debut a year after basically being picked. How exciting has he been in that little period of time, Jimmy? When did you first hear about him?
Well, really, he was playing for Brisbane State High literally in 2017. Just a few months later, they put him into a Reds trial at Ballymore, a pre-season trial, and it was a bit unexpected, and he just looked totally at home. And the big takeaway from players like Samu Kerevi is that he's got no fear. He just has a real crack, and that's not only with the ball, but also in defence. He's a robust guy, nearly 100 kilos, and he throws his weight around. He's a sensible guy. When he first came into the Wallabies training camps last year, they noticed how good he was under the high ball. He just attacked the high ball. So that's another element. The riveting game for me was the one against the Highlanders to start the year, when you had a classic centre pairing. Wow, how about that for Australian rugby?
Yeah.
They had Samu Kerevi being the big bullocking inside centre. Then you had Jordan Patea at outside centre, who had a bit of the stutter step, the fake with his shoulders, held the ball in two hands, ran for over 140 metres, bumped through Ben Smith in that game, set up his wingers beautifully. He's a very unselfish player. So all those classical elements of a good centre pairing were there.
And he's just not daunted. I just had a quick chat to Joe Roff, actually, to ask him about what a teenager on debut at a World Cup would be feeling, and he said he was massively daunted. And Bob Dwyer ripped into him at half-time saying, mate, you haven't said a word all half. And he said, who am I to be telling Jason Little to pass me the ball? Who am I to be talking to Michael Liner like, do this for me? You know, he said, these guys, I still had posters up on the wall of them. So that's what you suspect Jordan Patea. He's a quiet kid, but he seems very mature for his age. He'll be able to get into that zone. And he spent a lot of time with those guys, right? Like he's been doing test camps for a year and a half almost.
I think Kurtley Beale, he's a really interesting... Kurtley has consciously taken on more of a leadership role with some of the young backs the last two seasons, and he's had a nice relationship with Patea, and he said, look, he's in my back three, so I want to bring him into the game, I want to help him, I want to talk to him on the field. So that's a good sign from Kurtley.
Do you think maybe he sees a bit of himself in Patea? He came through the system very young, didn't he? So he's probably seeing him being able to, the different points that he can guide him. The Indigenous jersey, Jimmy, you mentioned that. We've seen a bit of it. We've seen the gold version. They're obviously wearing the green version here against Uruguay. It's no less significant to the players now than it ever has been. And Kurtley Beale, of course, got rubbed out of that Test match, suspended last year against England. So there's a little bit of extra significance for him, I suppose. But he talks a lot about what it signifies from a society point of view, and that it's a really powerful symbol of reconciliation and an acknowledgement for the people of Aboriginal heritage. So you expect Kurtley to be right in the zone tomorrow, don't you?
You do. Kurtley had a big game when he first wore it in 2017 against the All Blacks. Of course, that big night in Suncorp Stadium, Cauldron, Wallabies won. So I think any time you throw something different or special at a team, for them to embrace, and I think this really is such a galvanising jersey, a galvanising moment, because for Australia to be given the tick to wear an Indigenous jersey at a Rugby World Cup, no other country has gone that left field or even embraced the idea of pushing it to World Rugby. So credit to World Rugby for letting it fly, because it's a really meaningful statement of what rugby can do. And Kurtley had some very lovely words with Lloyd McDermott, the late Lord McDermott, who passed away this year, in Brisbane in 2017 before the first wearing of the jersey, where Lloyd said, I hope you realise what this will mean for this generation and generations to come. Talking of kids, talking of Aboriginal kids being welcomed into rugby, the feeling of being welcome, inspiring. Those are big words, and Kurtley has taken those principles on board, because you can see a broader picture than just him wearing a jersey. Tomorrow,
Jim, I get a bit worried when we play these games that we don't talk about the opposition enough. Uruguay showed they much improved, and they're one of the teams that have benefited, the Tier 2 teams that have benefited from World Rugby's investment in that zone. They spent something like 75 million Australian dollars in the last 4 years to help these Tier 2 teams get more competitive. So what did you notice out of that Fiji game? Why are Uruguay now in a position where they can knock off a Fiji?
Well, they played to their strengths, which is what any good team has to do, and that was a good scrum, a better scrum. They played tight to their forwards, so they used a bit of line-out drive, and they just stuck their tackles. Always the defence is the big indicator. If you're up for the task, doesn't matter what team you are, if you make your tackles, you're showing heart. You saw Japan against Ireland. They just tackled, and it was brilliant. Now, one thing you do find as you go into World Cups, how many more than one big performances do the Minnows have? It's a condensed program. They play maybe 5 tests a year in a normal year, and here you are trying to squeeze in 4 big tests of huge meaning, all in the space of a couple of weeks.
And it's the backing up part. You often see the big scores coming at the back half. Now, Jim, you mentioned that you've covered, or maybe you didn't, but you have covered a lot of World Cup rugby. I've covered some of them with you. Yeah. What are the defining? Give me one. Give me one defining characteristic of a winning Australian World Cup team? 91 and 99, you covered both of those tournaments.
Defining factor, one, big in my mind, and maybe less so in others, was just everything was set up before the first kick of the tournament. In those two cases, the Wallabies were based in Ireland. They got a lot of positive vibes from their surroundings, from the Irish, having a really well-bonded unit based in that. I'm guessing this Wallaby team feel the same from some of the camps before the first kick in Japan at their Japanese base. I think they love the environment here in Japan, so I think all those things are in their favour. I would have liked to have seen that Welsh game get close and them kick the penalty goal to win it.
Yeah.
And then you've got the burst, that absolute signpost to something huge, because you've just nailed it, and then everything else comes together and you just roll on. That's what momentum is at a World Cup. And the World Cup team of 91, they had obviously the great escape at Lansdowne Road against Ireland in the last few minutes. 99, that was convincing most of the way. But you really need to win those moments. That said, I didn't think this Wallaby team could win 7 games in a row, so they can't win 7 now, so they've got to do it the hard way, and that's probably what they are as a team.
That's silver lining. There's certainly, I guess they're now in the underdog class. No team has ever lost a pool game and won, as you point out. Let's look towards this test. Thank you very much for your time. It's been fantastic. How good, ladies and gentlemen? Jimmy Tucker, the king of the Courier Mail, and you're covering it for all the News Limited titles, so get along to News Limited and check out Jimmy's work. And, mate, have a good game and have a good rest of the World Cup. You heading back to the Onsens, or did you get banned from the Onsens for that last episode?
Well, there's no cameras involved in the Onsen, which is probably a good thing. But fabulous to let your hair down after a long day. I let my hair down a little shorter than others, but this is a great country. This is a fantastic joint. Got a really good vibe to it. So Aussies heading to Oita, this is the place to be.
Yep, you're going to have a ripper time, and if you're very lucky, you'll bump into Jim Tucker on the streets in his kimono. Jimmy, thank you very much for your time, mate.
Much appreciated.
That's all we've got for Rugby Nation. Listen, we've got the game coming up. We'll be back on Monday with a bit more daily wrap.